So 40k has always had balance issues, and some armies are more popular to play against than others. But have you ever had a situation where either you or your opponent has said, I'm not going to play against that? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're doing a bit more of a discussion related video about perhaps a slightly sad topic of when people don't want to play against certain things in a game of 40k. Basically, Warhammer 40k has always had balance issues, and over the editions things have waxed and waned. Sometimes you could certainly go into games knowing that there was absolutely no chance of winning, though to be honest, despite common perceptions, I would say that things aren't quite so terrible right now in 9th edition. I'd say the vast majority of factions do have a reasonable chance of beating virtually any other, by using their best combos and synergies and playing to the mission as well as possible. However, as we all know, Games Workshop does have a bit of a history of making things very strong. Just at the moment, some of the things that are scaring people most on the table are things like Space Marine Eradicators, Dark Angels Deathwing Terminators, and Death Guard in general, particularly Mortarion. As you'll probably be aware, I do like to talk about some of the strongest things in the game on the channel, as I do enjoy the more competitive side of 40k quite a lot. On quite a lot of videos though, I do get the reactions saying, well, if someone turned up with this, I would just refuse to play them. For me, it does seem like a little bit of a knee-jerky reaction to powerful rules, and to be honest, I think sometimes it's applied a lot more justly than it is for others. Some army builds can just be a bit punishing to play against, say for example Eldar Flyer Spam in 8th edition comes to mind, or perhaps Iron Hands when they were in their heyday, just being all round stronger than some other factions. These sort of things you might genuinely go into a game thinking I've got pretty much no chance of this, so it might not be as worth playing, but sometimes I do see people using it for things I'd consider much more minor, say such as a powerful character build, such as that Dark Angels Chaplain one that I talked about a week or so back, people saying that I'd refuse to play this, when in reality, even if he does hit pretty hard, he's quite easy to kill in any one fight phase, and he would take an enormous amount of investment in terms of warlord traits, relics and command points. I also suspect it might be a bit more of a common thing to say on the internet as opposed to in real life, and maybe a bit of a psychological thing trying to punish the players who get strong rules for their faction, by making them suffer a bit of a social penalty even if their faction is going to do very well in game. I suspect that not that many people are actually going to refuse games against someone who they know and like, even if they are playing a strong army. And you could always have the pre-game discussion saying, would it be okay to rein things in just a little bit so my army has a bit more of a chance? Just for me, in an actual real-world game of 40k, I think that refusing to play a game outright seems to be a bit of a drastic choice. I can see why some people might want to though, and I thought I'd gather a few thoughts about why people might want to or might not want to in this video. So why might people decide that playing a game of Warhammer 40k isn't really worth the effort then? Generally, it's because someone's appraised the game at the start and decided that they're just not going to have a fun time, and if they're not getting other things like good social interaction out of the exchange, then you might not want to spend a good 2 or 3 hours playing a game if you're not going to have fun with it for whatever reason. Playing 40k is a hobby, not a job, and if you're not having fun, then there might be not really all that much point. I think one of the main reasons that can really sap the fun if you really think that you have no chance to win, or even if you do have a small chance to win, but it's just not really a fair fight between the one army and the other. Say you're playing one of the factions that's struggling a little bit more in the game right now, perhaps Tau or Craftworld Eldar, and someone turns up with one of the strongest tournament lists around, maybe a tournament optimized Death Guard or Harlequin list for example, that you just can't see a reasonable solution to killing a lot of the units. It's really not all that hard to get disheartened when some armies just do have it a fair bit easier, and it can certainly sap the fun a bit if you know that no matter how hard you try or how hard you outthink, then there's pretty much no chance of your army getting the upper hand. Another reason why people might not want to play a certain army, even if the army strength isn't necessarily all that strong, could be if there's just not really going to be an interesting in-game interaction. Certain armies are just a bit less popular to play than others. Things just like going up against a shooting gallery gun line on a very open board. If you're playing a melee army, you're likely to get shot to bits, and the only real interaction is whether or not your troops can make it across the board into the gun line. I think skew lists are a bit less popular to play as well. Things like an army entirely made of super heavy vehicles, such as Imperial Knights. I know they really aren't all that strong right now, but certainly in ages past when they were some of those top things, the only real interaction was whether you brought enough anti-tank weapons to down the Knights before they just deleted your entire army. At the other end of the spectrum, some people don't like playing against really extreme horde type lists. Thinking back to the last edition a bit, it wasn't uncommon to see an absolutely enormous army of plague bearers on the other side of the table. There's often going to be a lot of time with the other player moving and playing their army, and you might just know that you've not got enough anti-infantry weapons to clear them off the objectives before they just score them all game long. I think more so than this, I think that just playing the same strong army repeatedly is a real turn-off. I'm sure all of the above will be quite fun to fight against once or twice, even if it is a weird game. But say if you're playing nothing but extreme horde lists every single time you take to the table, it could just get a little bit wearing and not be quite as fun. I think this might be some of the problem with Space Marine lists right now. So many people run them and they're really quite strong that people just get a bit tired of playing of them and often would just rather play something else. Otherwise, people sometimes just don't really like things that are profoundly against the fluff or lore. It can break immersion a bit. Some people just really aren't interested against playing unpainted armies, and whether or not the person asking for the game is actually likely to give you a fun game, I think the attitude of the person that you're playing against can really make a big difference as to how fun an experience is for both of you. I think any of these could be contributing factors as to whether you really want to play, but the main reason is that you kind of have limited time to invest in your hobby. You might have a choice between different opponents in 40k, or you might just want to choose to do something else with your free time if you really don't think that the game is going to be fun. Focusing back on army power levels and unbalanced games though, I would just like to mention a few things for why I would very rarely refuse a game based on how strong an army is. In 40k, something will pretty much always be the strongest. Obviously, we'd ideally like it to be more balanced if possible, but at least with the frequency that Games Workshop updates the rules these days, most armies do tend to have their time in the sun, and just over 8th and 9th edition alone, pretty much every army in the game has had its turn when it's been the strongest thing. One day your fluffy Dark Angels Deathwing Terminator army could be about the worst thing that you could field in the entire game of 40k, and then their new codex drops, and then suddenly they're the latest tournament hotness. I also perhaps think that some people underestimate just how well certain armies can be countered, either via some good decisions in-game, or just tailoring your own army to the meta and what sort of armies are likely going to be playing against. Slow-moving but powerful armies might be able to be screened out with good use of your units, and you might even be able to just ignore certain units, except they're going to do a bit of damage to your army, and focus on winning the mission and killing everything you can kill. Even really quite underpowered armies can be quite annoying to play against if you play them really defensively, hide loads of units out of line of sight terrain, and only try and pick and choose the battles when you can fight them. Taking a list to help really counter the meta can be really good as well. If Space Marines are everywhere on your local scene, loading up on a list with a lot of high damage, high AP weapons could be good. Or if everyone's loading up on those high damage, high AP weapons, maybe bringing a few more horde units to make them fairly redundant could be another decent option. A lot of the power builds will also need to make some sort of compromises in list building. No one's going to be able to field every single powerful option available to their own codex. They have to pick and choose, and often some armies can just be a bit scarier on paper compared with the actual things that they can deploy in any given game. Perhaps above all this though, I really quite like playing against strong armies in 40k, as even if you are beaten horribly, you have the chance to learn and get better as a player. I think most people will learn more from a defeat than they would from a victory, maybe reassessing the power of your own units and how you might have used them a bit better in game. I also find having a go at taking down the latest tournament cheese is really quite interesting. Knowing that you're already on the back foot and having to deploy every single sneaky trick available to your army can be quite interesting, and can really be a test of your mettle as a commander, even if it's not something that you might want for every single game. Just more generally though, I think it is important to be able to enjoy Warhammer 40k even if you are losing. Even if you're performing exactly average in every single game, you're likely going to be winning half of the games and losing the other half, so I think it's important to be able to enjoy a defeat as well as enjoy a victory, even if most of us do prefer to win. So just for some of my own opinions, I would try and aim to play against almost anyone and any list at least once, and ideally a fair bit more than that. You might not know how to deal with it the first time it comes up, but hopefully with some tactics and strategy, you might have a bit better luck. Otherwise though, I think if people can try and aim to refuse less games, it is generally going to be better for the hobby. You might miss out on getting to know some really good people, even if they are bringing some cheesy army lists. I don't think it's particularly helpful to make people feel bad for the faction that they play. I often see people getting a bit disheartened down in the comments on my videos when people say, well, I'd never play against that, and then they say, oh, I just started that faction, are people not going to want to play me? And I think that quite a lot of the issues, if you're really having them, could be resolved with a bit of a pre-game discussion. If you've already been drubbed by your friend's power list 3 or 4 times, maybe just request that they tone things down a bit, as it might make for a bit more of an interesting game for both people involved. There's all sorts of ways to shake up a game of 40k or make it a bit more interesting, either with different mission types, narrative game modes, or just building some slightly more unusual fluff lists that don't use every single optimized unit that an army has available. In any case, I'd really love to hear your thoughts about refusing games, when and if you ever should or would, and how we can make games of 40k, both competitive and casual, more enjoyable for everyone. So anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm definitely looking forward to reading your comments. I found the topic quite interesting to have a think about myself. If you've enjoyed the discussion and would like to see more like it, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll have more like this, in addition to our regularly scheduled 40k Tactics content. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos lately, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the channel's prize giveaways, which happen every month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.